While H. Holmes had his murder castle in Chicago, and Jack the Ripper terrorized Whitechapel, a third man, a psycho for profit, would leave a trail of death across 2 continents and 3 countries. His murder spree, often tied to blackmail attempts, would hop back and forth across the Atlantic. His possible attempt at a gallows confession, while surely false, created a massive amount of buzz at his death. I'm Mick Biddick, and this is History is Criminal. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the life of Thomas Neill Cream. Born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1850, his family immigrated to Canada. While there is little remarkable about his early years, it can be assumed he was a bright student. He attended the University of Montreal, where he earned a medical degree in 1876. In both his undergrad and graduate years, he had a reputation as a wild and extravagant young man. His father kept him well supplied with money, and Cream gladly showed it off. Doctors were in short supply in both Canada and the U.S., so Cream made his way across the border to Des Moines, Iowa. But it seems to have only stayed a short time. Why he left is unclear. He then made his way to Waterloo, Quebec, Canada, where he met Flora Brooks, the daughter of a wealthy hotel owner. A relationship quickly sprang up between the two, with Cream promising to marry Flora. Whether his offer was genuine or not is hard to tell, but what is known for sure is that Cream impregnated Flora. Then, being the true gentleman he was, he attempted to give Flora an abortion. He botched the surgery and then skipped town, headed back to Montreal. Flora's father tracked Cream down and forced him to return to Waterloo and keep his promise to marry his daughter. However, the day after the wedding, literally, marriage day 1, Cream skipped town and this time headed to England and St. Thomas Medical School to complete his postgraduate degree. He never returned to Waterloo. Flora never fully recovered from the failed procedure and died in 1877, and could arguably be called Cream's first victim. Once again, Cream excelled in school and graduated with merits. His thesis at St. Thomas was on the effects of chloroform on the human body. Doctorate in hand, he was then off to Edinburgh, Scotland, to study at the famous Surgeon Square, a place that played a major part in the crimes of Burke and Hare 50 years earlier. Upon finishing at Surgeon Square, he once again crossed the Atlantic and took up the practice of medicine in London, Ontario. But it seems he was not fully licensed to practice medicine in Canada and was charged with a violation of Ontario's Medical Act of practicing without a license. He pled guilty, but did not take down his shingle. His practice seems to center around giving aid to those on the fringe of society. Giving abortions to prostitutes became somewhat a specialty of his. It would be this reputation that would make Cream suspect in the questionable death of Catherine Hutchinson Gardner. Gardner was found dead in an outhouse behind Cream's office in 1878. Police ascertained that she had died from a chloroform overdose, administered with a rag. Remember, chloroform was what Cream did his doctoral dissertation on. It didn't take long for the police focus to turn to Cream. The theory was that Gardner had come to Cream for an abortion, but Cream tried to turn the pregnancy into a blackmail scheme. They theorized that Cream tried to get her to name a local businessman as the father. Cream was even said to be in possession of a forged note naming the businessman. Cream, for his part, said Gardner came to him and asked that he perform an abortion, but he refused. He claimed that his refusal, Gardner threatened suicide if he didn't help her terminate the pregnancy. It was at this point that Cream supposedly offered the blackmail scheme as an alternative to abortion. While Cream's involvement was crystal clear, it was hard to prove murder. Police didn't seem to try to dig too terribly deep either. and Cream was not charged with anything. Officially, the crime went unsolved, but everyone was pointing the finger at Cream. It was now time for Cream to make his way back across the border, this time landing in Chicago in 1880, a city that 11 years later would play host to H. Holmes. For Cream, he would make his home on the west side of the Windy City, setting up shop near the red light district. Here, just as in London, Ontario, he offered illegal abortions to sex workers. In August 1880, he was questioned in the death of Mary Ann Faulkner. Faulkner died after a botched abortion. Police brought in Cream for questioning, but he was released due to a lack of evidence. Then in December, another of his patients died. This time, a Miss Stack died of an overdose while under the care of Cream. While Cream seems to have attempted to use the death again in a blackmail scheme, this time against a pharmacist who had supplied the drugs. But Cream would once again escape without any charges. In April 1881, Alice Montgomery was found dead of strychnine poisoning following an abortion. The death was ruled a homicide, but no charges were brought against anyone. However, the location and methods and timing would all point to Cream. Up to this point, Cream's victims, with the possible exception of his own wife, were people living on the outside of acceptable society. As sad as it sounds, police might not have been willing to work too hard to solve the murder of sex workers from the poor west side of Chicago. If that were true, then Cream was about to make his first major mistake. Cream had started to treat Daniel Stott for epilepsy. Cream had convinced Stott and his wife Julia they could control his epilepsy with doses of strychnine. Now, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, so I have no idea if this is a good idea, but I would think taking a deadly poison to fight a neurological disorder is crazy. However, there actually is a May 1867 issue of the Chicago Medical Examiner that said it was a viable treatment. So, boom, go ahead and give him strychnine. Good idea or not, it would seem the dose would have to be very carefully monitored. And when Cream started to have an affair with Julia, it seems the doses were maybe not monitored as closely as needed. To Julia, the plot was a way for her and Cream to be together. Yet, when pushed, Julia would turn on Cream faster than LeBron turned on Cleveland in 2010. If you don't know basketball, then maybe think Brutus and Caesar. In any case, maybe don't trust someone willing to kill their spouse. After all, they kind of given a reason to question their loyalty. Julia's story was that Cream convinced her to take out an insurance policy on her husband. Then he gave her pills to give to Daniel. He would die on July 14th, 1881, just minutes after taking these pills that were supplied by Cream. Julia and Cream were in the clear. The death was ruled accidental. Then Cream went to the well one too many times. He wrote a letter to the coroner accusing the pharmacist of messing up the prescription and said he planned on suing the pharmacist on behalf of Julia. This was a variation of his earlier schemes to blackmail earlier pharmacists. Unfortunately for Cream, the coroner took the issue to the police. Daniel's body was exhumed and found to contain enough strychnine to kill him 3 times over. Julia and Cream at this point were brought in for questioning, and she quickly folded. After Julia turned state's evidence, the trial went just as quick, with Cream being found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life and sent to Joliet State Prison. Now, this is where his story should end, but as it was the Gilded Age and corruption was word of the day, his story will continue. Cream's family had money and connections. They started a campaign to get Cream's sentence commuted. They pushed for leniency and got their powerful friends to use political connections. After a decade in prison, Governor Joseph W. Pfeiffer commuted Cream's sentence. While officially this was due to factors like good behavior and questionable evidence of his guilt, yet the reality seems a little more bribe based. Rumors even spread that Cream had bribed his way out of Juliet long before getting his reprieve, but all evidence tends to point to the fact that he had spent from 1882 to 1891 in Juliet prison. This will come up later when we talk about some of the Ripper theories. What is known for sure is that by the 1st of October, 1891, Cream was in London. Reportedly, he was addicted to drugs, but was able to pass publicly as being in control. While communication had greatly improved by the late Victorian age, it seems that background checks were still a few decades away, so the addicted, convicted murderer was able to set up a new medical practice in London's Lambeth region. Lambeth was a low-income neighborhood with high crime, with rampant petty theft, and sex work everywhere. It easily allowed Cream to get back to his old ways. On the 13th of October, Cream met 19-year-old Ellen Donworth. Donworth was a sex worker and would have been easy prey for the well-educated, handsome, dapper doctor. He gave Donworth a bottle that she must have thought was fine wine. After taking a drink, she convulsed, becoming violently ill, and then died. While this murder seems pointless, Cream would try to turn it into a profit. Only 3 years removed from the Jack the Ripper killings, London was very much still on edge. Police needed answers, or at least a fall guy. It was in this atmosphere that Cream would choose to interject himself into the investigation. He wrote a letter to the coroner under the fake name Detective A. O'Brien. He told the coroner he would name the killer in return for a £300,000 reward. Then he wrote to W.F.D. Smith, a wealthy member of Parliament, and attempted to blackmail him, claiming he had evidence Smith was the killer, and unless paid off, he would go public with the proof. Neither scam would be tied to Cream until later, and it seems neither man bought into Cream's plot. But this didn't slow him down. 20th of October, Cream met 27-year-old sex worker Matilda Clover. He supplied her with pills, told her to take 4 before bed. After taking the pills, Clover suffered from extreme stomach pains. 2 hours later, she was dead. Her death was written off as the effect of alcohol withdrawal. It wasn't until Cream once again interjected himself into the case that anyone suspected murder. Cream sent a letter to one Dr. William Broadbent, a wealthy surgeon. Now, if you Google this, do not confuse him with Dr. William T. Broadbent, currently practicing in Pennsylvania. Trust me, that was a confusing Google search. This William Broadbent had gained some notoriety for saving the life of Prince George, the future King of England, from typhoid fever. Cream once again would say he had evidence implicating the doctor, the now Sir Broadbent, in the death of Matilda Clover. Sir Broadbent, instead of paying the bribe, sent the letter to Scotland Yard. Detective Alfred Ward came on the scene. Ward was building a reputation as one of the brightest detectives in Scotland Yard and was responsible for developing many of the techniques used by the Yard to track and capture criminals, and would, of course, later be the arresting detective in the Great Pearl Heist, a callback to an earlier episode. A drop was arranged and the money left for the blackmailer. But when it came time to pick up the funds, it seems Cream had started to interact with some of the detectives and constables and had become aware of the trap. Maybe feeling the heat starting to build up, Cream took a short trip to Canada. By this time, the papers were telling the story of the Lambeth Poisoner. Still in the heart of the age of yellow journalism, the papers spared no detail. Just as they had done with the Jack the Ripper killings 4 years earlier, they printed every detail and theory they could. On the 2nd of April, just after Cream returned to London, another victim was found. However, this time, she would live to tell her story. Lou Harvey encountered a well-dressed, handsome man, and in the course of their interaction, he gave her 2 pills, telling her to take them right away. Being a street, smart young lady, and knowing all too well that the Lambeth Poisoner was still on the loose, she refused to ingest the pills. This man, later proven to be Cream, began to pressure her to take the pills. Most likely, fearing possible violence, but also possible poisoning, she pretended to pop the pills while in fact dropping them off a bridge into the Thames River. This sleight of hand most likely saved her life. Cream wasted little time finding his next victim. 11th of November, Cream found the company of 2 prostitutes, Alice March, 21, and Emma Shrivel, 19. After spending the night with the 2 women, Cream gave them pills and canned salmon. After eating the salmon and taking the pills, both women died of strychnine poisoning. Now, not the victim blame here, but a poisoner's running around loose, killing prostitutes in their late teens and 20s. Maybe, just maybe, don't take the pills given to you by one of your Johns. Was it the canned salmon that got them to lower their guard? Or was it after spending the night with him, they were thinking they were safe? It's hard to say. But Cream must have been feeling untouchable by this time. And as would happen, a New York police officer, John Haynes, traveled to London. Haynes was an old acquaintance of Cream. Upon meeting in London, Haynes expressed interest in the Lambeth Poisoner. For Haynes, this was most likely just a cop on vacation taking an interest in some of the local famous crimes. To his surprise, his friend seemed to know an awful lot about the poisoner. Cream took Haynes on a guided tour of the location of the killings, giving details that didn't appear in the paper. Finding this intimate knowledge of the case odd, to say the least, Haynes spoke to a friend at Scotland Yard. Seeing that Cream had detailed knowledge that was only known to the police and the killer, Detective Ward ordered Cream to be put under surveillance. Officers trailing Cream reported that he was a frequent guest of prostitutes. The Yard also sent a message to Canada and American authorities trying to get background on the good doctor. When word returned from the U.S. that Cream had been in jail for murder by poison, Ward knew he had his man. Cream was arrested on the 3rd of June, 1892, in charge of the murder of Matilda Clover. Then on the 13th, additional charges for the murders of Donworth, Marsh, and Shrivel were added, along with the charges of the attempted murder of Harvey. Cream claimed that this was all a misunderstanding, that he was not Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, but in fact, Dr. Thomas Neill. He had no idea who this Cream was, and he had never been involved in any murders in the United States. Hard to know if Cream really thought this would work. For most of history, it'd be hard to tell who a person really was, and it wouldn't be terribly hard to just simply use a different name and basically reinvent yourself. But this was now the age of transatlantic telegraphs. News traveled much quicker than at any other point in history, and the court just wasn't buying Cream's story. Then a search of his home turned up a passport issued in the name of Thomas Neill Cream, killing the mistaken identity defense. Ward found Lucy Rose, a young woman who was able to identify a man called Fred, who was referred to as Clover's boyfriend. Fred was with Clover just before her death. When questioned, Rose identified Cream as Fred. Two other prostitutes were able to place Cream with Clover on the night of her death. Things were not exactly looking good for Cream at this point. Scotland Yard was a major force in the beginning of forensic science. One area they had become quite competent in was graphology, the study of handwriting. Once provided with various blackmail notes, they were able to compare to samples of Cream's writing, and they showed to be a match. While Ward and Scotland Yard were sure they had the right man, the evidence only showed that Cream knew Clover and had attempted blackmail. His detailed knowledge of the murders could even be written off as a combination of newspapers printing too many details and police telling stories when they shouldn't have, and a little lucky speculation on his part. Cream showed a cocky confidence at the start of his trial. After all, there had been no witnesses to the actual killings, and the failed blackmail attempts wouldn't put him away for long. After all, he'd once already walked out of prison, serving 10 years on what was supposed to be a life sentence. But when Lucy Harvey took the stand, Cream's confidence melted away. She told the story of being handed pills and the pressure to take the pills right away. But it was one of those made-for-TV courtroom moments that sealed Cream's fate. When asked if the man who gave her pills was in the court, she said, quote, "Yes, he is. There he is, as big as life," and pointed to Cream. The trial lasted 5 days, but it only took the jury 12 minutes to return a guilty verdict. Justice Henry Hawkins sentenced him to death. Cream climbed the gallows at London's Newgate prison on the 15th of November. Hangman James Billington placed a noose around Cream's neck. Then, just before dropping, Cream said, "I'm Jack the..." But his sentence was cut off as his neck snapped. Some believe that Cream was attempting to confess to being Jack the Ripper. Some even published this confession, claiming that the Ripper murders were now solved. But Cream being the Ripper would seem very unlikely. First, he was in Joliet State Prison when the Ripper's reign of terror played out. While some believed he had bribed his way out of prison in time to commit the Ripper killings in 1888, there are other problems with the story. While the victims of Cream and the Ripper share a common victimology, their methods of killing vary greatly. Cream was a poisoner, the Ripper a violent slasher. And while it's not unheard of for serial killers to change their MO, it is rare and normally only done if they feel pressure. If Cream was the Ripper, he surely wasn't under police pressure, as no one would even know he was in the country. In addition, Cream was a highly trained and skilled surgeon. While some believe Jack the Ripper might have been a doctor with some medical training, this is based on his removal of body parts. The theory was actually tossed out by Scotland Yard due to the fact that the cuts made by the Ripper showed no signs of medical knowledge or skill. Police surgeon Dr. Thomas Bond would go as far to say they lacked even the skill or knowledge of a good butcher. So why would he say, "I'm Jack the..." right before he died? Cream might have been hoping that a last-minute confession would buy him a little more time. It's possible he never even said those words. Reportedly, only Billington heard the statement. Perhaps Billington wanted the notoriety of being the executioner of Jack the Ripper and made the story up. One other theory put a weird twist on Cream's final words. Some suggest that Cream's motives for killing young women, primarily sex workers, was a psychosexual in nature, and that killing gave him sexual gratification, and that what he was just saying is not, I'm Jack but what he's just saying is, I'm ejaculating. I'm going to let you make your own jokes here involving his last name. Why he would announce this to the world with his dying breath, who knows? It just adds one more layer of strange to the story of the transcontinental murderer, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream. This has been History is Criminal. Thanks to the evil deeds of Dr. Cream, Canadian History.ca and CrimeLibrary.org, who served as major sources for this episode. Please leave a comment and tell me what you liked or what I can do better. And as always, if you liked what you heard, tell a friend. And if you don't like it, tell an enemy. Why suffer alone? Come back in 2 weeks and we'll take a look at another crime from the dustbins of history. This one, a truly horrible, horrible stories of the baby farmers. And don't forget my other podcast, A Skeptic's Journey with Cryptids and Folklore. Till then, this has been History is Criminal.